Welcome back. Now, in this lesson, we're going to answer the questions, what specifically is the unconscious mind? How has it been affecting you? And most importantly, how can you learn how to reprogram and control your unconscious mind so that it no longer controls you? So imagine it this way. Imagine there's these invisible magnetic forces going on the inside. And at any given point in time, these magnetic forces, they're either pulling you or drawing you or driving you towards certain things, or alternatively, they're sort of repelling or pushing you against or resisting certain things. So for example, have you ever been trying to do something that you know is good for you, something that you know you're supposed to be doing, but it feels like something on the inside is kind of just like pushing you away from it, or it's repelling you against that thing. So it becomes this exhausting kind of struggle to try and force yourself to stay motivated to do it. Or likewise, has there ever been something that you know you probably shouldn't be doing, something that's not so good for you, but it feels like something on the inside is just magnetically drawing or pulling you towards it, and it becomes an exhausting struggle to try and pull yourself away from it. Now, if your unconscious programming is magnetically pulling you towards really healthy eating, dietary, and exercise habits, then that's fantastic. Likewise, if your unconscious programming is pulling you towards really productive work and study habits that are going to be really great for your future success, then that's great as well. And most importantly, if your unconscious programming is drawing you or attracting you to the right kind of people that are going to be respectful of you and boost your self-esteem and sort of hold you to a higher standard and be understanding of you, then you're very, very fortunate. However, if that's not always the case, then that's okay. But remember not to fall into the trap that most people fall into. See, what most people do is they try to force themselves in the direction of the things that they think are good for them. But if you just try to force yourself or rely on staying motivated or rely on willpower, then it's just kind of like, it's like paddling upstream against a strong current. You can kind of do it for a while, but eventually you're going to become exhausted, and that's when you just give up or fall back into your old familiar patterns. So the trick is not to try to rely on willpower or force yourself against those magnetic forces, but instead to learn how to reprogram them so that they will magnetically pull you towards the things that you know are good for you, rather than resisting those things and instead pulling you in the wrong direction. So that way, it's kind of like sitting back and just going with the flow. Your unconscious mind will automatically take you in the direction that you want to go. So if that sounds like something you can associate with, and most importantly, if that sounds like something that you'd like to learn how to do, then this session is going to start to make a lot more sense to you. So to get started, let's begin by looking at a model of how the brain works. Now, scientists say that the brain evolved from the inside out. So if you look deep down in the inner layers of the brain, this is often referred to as the reptilian brain. It's a part of the brain that involves things like the amygdala, basically responsible for a lot of our more primitive animal instincts, things like fight or flight, sexual reproduction, territorial dominance and aggression. You'll find this section of the brain in more primitive animals like reptiles, obviously, which is why it's called the reptilian brain. The layer above the reptilian brain is often referred to as the mammalian brain. Now, this involves things like the limbic system, parts of the brain that are basically very much responsible for emotions and feelings. You'll find this in the brains of mammals, which is why, for example, if you had both a pet lizard and a pet dog, they'll both display similar animal instincts for things like, territorial dominance, but you're going to be able to connect a lot more emotionally with the dog than you will the lizard, simply because that's the way that their brain is structured. There's other parts of the brain in there that are also sort of responsible for our herd instinct. Humans are very much pack animals. We rely on being part of a group to survive through our evolutionary history. But also in more advanced mammals like primates and dolphins, and obviously especially humans, we have a section on the outside, often referred to as the neocortex. Now, as humans, we have the most advanced and evolved neocortex. That's the part of the brain that really differentiates us from other animals. It gives us the ability to use language to communicate what we've learned onto somebody else, so that then they can communicate that onto somebody else and so forth, so we can pass knowledge along generations. Other animals can't do that. It's also the part of the brain that gives us the ability to use logic and problem solving and reasoning, which basically gives us the intelligence that other animals don't have. The interesting thing about the brain is, just like muscles, the parts that get the most exercise tend to be the strongest. But the really cool thing about the human brain is that those outer layers of the brain that give us our adult conscious awareness and our intelligent abilities also gives us the abilities to observe the inner workings of the brain without necessarily having to react to them. So in other words, we can consciously be aware, observe our own instincts and emotions without necessarily having to act on them. We can actually observe them, and we can even respond back to them and retrain those inner parts of the brain. We can actually, like our muscles, we can choose to exercise certain muscles, but likewise, we can choose to exercise the way that our brain works as well, if we know how to. And that's the key thing I'd like you to be aware of. Just because as humans we have the physiological capacity to do something, doesn't mean that we do it automatically. It's like language. Just because we have the ability to learn language doesn't mean that we necessarily do. It's still something that we have to consciously decide to learn how to do. So as wonderful as our brain is, here's the downside, okay? The problem becomes when we've got these animal instincts, these childlike emotions, these social rules and expectations, and these logical, rational thinking, all sort of going on at the same time. But the problem is that sometimes those different parts of us want different things at the same time. Or sometimes different parts of us kind of take the driver's seat at different times, which is why sometimes you'll notice that you may feel differently about the same thing depending on your mood, or depending on what's going on, depending on the environment at the time. And so we've got all these different parts of us all sort of wanting different things and often going in different directions, which creates this sort of internal tug of war. This what you could call internal conflict. The aim, therefore, is to get all the different parts of us all pulling in the one direction. When all the different parts of our brain, all the different parts of our personality are all working together, that's when we become pretty much unstoppable. Nothing is going to get in our way. The trick, though, is in learning how to actually achieve that.
If it often feels like there are different parts of you that want different things at different times, well, now you have a deeper understanding of why that is. When the different parts of our instincts, emotions, and thoughts conflict, we feel magnetically drawn in the wrong direction. This keeps us stuck in a vicious cycle of self-sabotage where no matter how much we try to force the change, we just end up getting exhausted. In the following lessons, Stuart will show you a simple model of how your unconscious mind works that will make it easier to understand. He'll then show you some simple exercises to retrain and strengthen the different parts of your mind to work together, so that the more primitive parts will follow your lead rather than you being driven by them. When you learn how to do this, your mind will stop resisting the change you want and instead develop an unstoppable motivation that will magnetically drive you towards these goals without even having to try.